Hi, what's up? I'm Sheila from Cacao Culture and welcome back to our channel, the best place for cacao farmers and chocolate makers. In this video, I'm going to talk about roasting of cacao beans, specifically the different equipment and methods of roasting cacao beans. In our previous episode, we talked about how to choose the best cacao beans for processing. So before you load cacao beans into the roaster, you must be sure that what you're using are high quality cacao beans. So if you haven't checked that out, please make sure to check on our previous episode. Now, before we dive into the topic, I'd like to discuss why we are roasting the cacao beans. So it's really important to roast the cacao beans sufficiently and expose them to high heat to kill harmful bacteria such as E. coli and Salmonella. We roast the cacao beans to make sure that they are safe to consume. Remember, these cacao beans have been processed in the farm and have fermented and dried for over a week in open air and exposed to other contaminants. These post-harvest processes are perfect environment for fungi, molds, and other contaminants to grow. We talked about post-harvest processes of fermentation and drying in our previous episodes, so please make sure to check that out because we discussed those processes in detail. So back to why we are roasting cacao beans. Number 2, to develop chocolate flavor. Roasting is important for the flavor development of chocolate. So during roasting, various chemical reactions happen inside the beans where natural sugars and amino acids are converted into different flavor compounds. So when roasting, acidity and volatile acids are reduced while the chocolate flavor and taste is being produced. Number 3, to reduce moisture. Cacao beans after the process of drying still contains about 6.5 to 7% moisture, and it's important to reduce this moisture even further because water and chocolate does not mix well. Roasting significantly reduces the moisture content and it makes the next process, which is grinding, so much easier. Number 4, to separate the husk or shells from the beans. Roasting helps to easily separate the shells from the nibs. It is a good indicator that the beans have been roasted well when the shells come off easily using just your fingers. Now let's get into the details of how to roast the cacao beans. There are many ways to roast a cacao beans, and if you ask the question what is the best equipment to use in roasting cacao, different chocolate makers will have different opinions. It depends on what you want to achieve, what's available to you, and what you can afford at the moment. What you have to remember is that no matter the equipment, the basic technique is the same. So what we're trying to do when roasting is subject the cacao beans to a high temperature initially and then slowly reduce the temperature and stop when you hear the popping sound and well before it starts to get burnt. The roasting temperatures and time also depends on your own preference as a chocolate maker. So what we're going to discuss in this video are general guidelines that you can follow when using different equipment and also give you some tips on developing your own roasting profiles. Here in the Philippines, ito yung method that we commonly see that's being practiced. This is also the simplest way to roast the cacao beans because a pan in the stove is the most commonly available equipment at our homes. It's probably not the most effective and consistent, but it's something nearly everyone can do. Baka you can still remember your grandparents doing this at home. Diba? Traditionally, you roast natin using the pan and then you can smell the tablea or the cacao beans cooking. So if you're using this equipment, what you usually do is start off with high heat for about 5 minutes and then you continue by lowering down the heat for another 20 to 30 minutes until you're satisfied with the roast. In 2017, when we were just starting, this is the method that we used, especially when we were doing test batches for our cacao beans. Have you tried using a pan and a stove in roasting cacao beans, or are you planning to start off and learn how to roast cacao beans? Let us know in the comment section down below what your experience is in roasting cacao beans using a pan. So the second equipment is using a convection oven. Oven is another popular way to roast cacao, and most kitchens at home would have one. It is also very convenient to use if you're just doing sample batches of about 1 to 2 kilos of cacao beans. So this is another very easy method. So what you do is you just lay down the cacao beans in a single layer on an oven tray. Preferably, it's a perforated tray because we want the air to flow around the cacao beans, and then just place it in the oven. Remember that the cacao beans have to be moved around a few times for a more even roast. As I've said, roasting time and temperatures are the own preference of the chocolate maker. So generally, we roast the cacao beans between 20 to 30 minutes and temperatures between 250 to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. You start at a high temperature of about 300 to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 5 minutes, and then lower it down gradually by 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit and complete the roasting time of about 30 minutes, or depending on the flavor profile that you want to develop. One challenge in using a convection oven is keeping the temperature steady, because when you have to move around the cacao beans on the tray, or if you need to get a sample to taste the cacao beans if it's already roasted, then you have to open the oven door and then the heat will escape. So the third equipment that we will discuss is using a drum roaster. So a drum roaster is a cylindrical chamber that rotates horizontally over a heating element so that the cacao beans can be evenly roasted. There are many types of drum roasters, and it comes in various sizes. It can come as a tabletop drum roaster or even like big industrial machines. So they can roast over a gas grill or a heating element or an open fire. So na-experience namin yung mga drum roasters na walang temperature gauge. And nahirapan kami sa paggamit noon because it doesn't give us the control over the temperature and the flexibility that we want in the roast. So it's good if your drum roaster has a temperature gauge and something to control the heat or the temperature, so you have more control and flexibility. To use the drum roaster, preheat it to around 350 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Load the cacao beans before you start the rotation. So just make sure that the temperatures will not reach beyond 400 degrees Fahrenheit because the cacao beans will dry quickly and it might over roast. So the fourth equipment that we will discuss is using a coffee roaster. Some chocolate makers use coffee roasters, but please take note that they need to be modified. Coffee is normally roasted at a much higher heat, so the temperatures will have to be modified to suit the roasting requirements for cacao beans. Another thing that has to be modified is the drum speed. So for cacao, it has to be much slower compared to coffee roasting. So one advantage of using a coffee roaster is that it can be programmed. So it's easier for you to repeat the process or the roasting profiles for the next batches. However, one drawback is that it can be very expensive, and with the modifications that you need to do in order to suit the roasting for cacao beans, it can really go up to a high price. So how do you know if the beans are already roasted? Since the temperature and the roasting time varies greatly depending on the equipment that you will use, we'll give you some general guidelines on how to tell if the cacao beans are properly roasted. So first is the color of the bean. It should be dark, chocolatey brown all the way through, but not black, because black means it's over roasted. Second is puffiness of the shell. It should come off easily when you rub the cacao beans between your fingers and your thumb. The third is taste. It should be crunchy, not chewy, and should not taste raw or nut-like. Another good indicator that the beans are getting close to done is when they start popping or you hear some cracking sounds. And number 5, it smells like brownies. After roasting the cacao beans, what you need to do is to spread them out evenly and let it cool. Remember that they will continue roasting on their own heat. Therefore, it is important to bring them down to room temperature as fast as possible. So some equipment like coffee roasters come with their own cooling tray, but don't worry, if you don't have one, then you can just use an electric fan to lower down the heat. Now, here are some tips in developing your own roasting profiles. A roasting profile is a set of temperatures that you have determined to use for that particular set of cacao beans or batch of cacao beans. A good roasting profile will meet the requirements that I discussed initially on why we're roasting the cacao beans, which is to kill the bacteria, for flavor development, to lower down the moisture content, and to separate the shells from the nibs. Take note that flavor is very subjective. So the roasting profiles are wholly dependent on the taste and the preferences of the chocolate maker. The way to create a roasting profile is to do small test roasts on cacao beans, especially if it comes from a new source or a new origin. When roasting cacao beans, it's important to know the variety. Why? Because roasting affects the flavor of the chocolate. Now, in roasting different varieties, we have to make sure that we're bringing out the full potential of the flavor of that cacao variety. For example, if you have a Criollo or a Trinitario, it's known for the fruity or the floral notes in the cacao beans. So if you subject it to a high temperature or roast it on high temperatures, then you will lose those fruity and floral notes. And those are really good flavor profiles for your chocolate. Forastero beans, on the other hand, are usually roasted at a higher temperature so that you can reduce the volatile flavors like acidity and astringency. Sort and roast the cacao beans according to size for a more even roast. The beans should be separated into large, medium, or small beans and then roasted per batch. And based on this, then you can set the parameters on the temperature and the roasting time per size. So, pag pinagsama-sama mo lang sila lahat, there's a big chance na yung mga maliliit na beans will become over-roasted and yung malalaking beans naman might be under-roasted, so it will affect the overall flavor of your product. Tip number 3. Experiment with different temperatures and timing. When trying out different roasts or doing small test batches, it's very important to record everything. Record the type of beans that you use, the roasting temperatures and the timing that you used for that particular batch, and most importantly, record the results or the final flavors that you can taste based on the roast that you made. By doing different roasting experiments, you will be able to find the ideal roasting profile for the type of beans that you have. And then you can make your own recipe and produce fine craft chocolates. In our next episode, we'll discuss the next step in the bean-to-bar chocolate making process, which is cracking and winnowing. So make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you get notified when we upload our new video. In the meantime, please make sure to watch our previous episodes. We like to talk about cacao, chocolates, and entrepreneurship. So thank you for watching our video and see you on the next one. Bye!